Mr. Mamdani, if you speak one more time without permission, I will hold you in contempt. The entire courtroom froze. Judge Andrew H. leaned forward, eyes burning through his glasses. The marble walls of the Manhattan Supreme Court seemed to close in as Zohran Mamdani, standing alone at the plaintiff's table, didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't fold. He just stared back, calm, defiant. What happens when a judge forgets justice, when power stops listening and starts punishing? And what if the only person left to speak is the one being silenced? This wasn't just a hearing. It was a war of principle. And it had started, like most wars do, quietly, months earlier, over something that sounded small, procedural, bureaucratic. It began with a letter. In late spring, Zohran received a tip-off. Several tenants in Queens, mostly immigrants, had been issued illegal eviction notices. Not one or two, dozens. In buildings owned by a real estate consortium with a long history of code violations and political donations. When Zohran tried to subpoena city records to investigate deeper, the court system responded with a brick wall. And sitting atop that wall was Judge Andrew H., known for his conservative rulings and aversion to activist legislators interfering in legal matters. Zohran didn't back down. He filed for public release of the court documents, arguing that the people had a right to know why families were being forced out. The case landed, as if by fate, on Andrew H.'s bench. What should have been a straightforward procedural review became something far more sinister. From day one, the judge treated Zohran not like a plaintiff, but like a threat. Filings were delayed, hearings rescheduled, key evidence was lost in processing. The courtroom clerk refused to accept Zohran's affidavits without extra verification. Nothing was subtle, nothing was fair. And still, Zohran kept going. Each appearance, he arrived with facts, witnesses, documentation, and each time, he was met with the same cold wall of indifference. Until today, until that moment, when he spoke directly to the judge about a document the court had mysteriously omitted. A document showing a series of nighttime evictions carried out with police escorts. No warrants, no prior notice, just families forced into the street. That's when the judge snapped. Mr. Mamdani, if you speak one more time without permission. But what if staying silent meant letting children sleep on concrete? What if order in the courtroom came at the cost of justice outside its walls? There were journalists in the back row. One of them was live streaming. They had come to witness what they thought would be a dry legal standoff. Instead, they were watching something else. A sitting judge visibly threaten an elected official for demanding transparency. The tension was unbearable. Every breath seemed loud. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights felt intrusive. Yet Zohran didn't move. He didn't apologize. He didn't blink. I will speak, he said, voice steady. Because someone has to. There was a gasp, small, involuntary, from the public gallery. The bailiff took one step forward, unsure. Judge Andrew H. tightened his jaw and slammed the gavel. Once. Hard. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't submission. It was support. For the first time, the room wasn't on the judge's side. And outside, Twitter was already on fire. What happens next when a courtroom stops obeying its own rules? Can truth survive the weight of power? And is there still room for courage, even in the most hostile spaces? If you believe voices like Zohran's matter, hit subscribe, and let us know, how would you have responded in that courtroom? The courtroom emptied slowly that afternoon. Reporters lingered outside, waiting for Zohran to exit, but he didn't. He remained seated at the plaintiff's table, unmoving, as if the air itself had thickened. Behind him, the heavy oak doors creaked shut. The silence returned, not the tense kind from earlier, but the hollow kind that follows a blow you didn't expect to land. Judge Andrew H. had left the bench without a word after the outburst. No closing statements, no ruling, no explanation. Inside the judge's chamber, however, there was plenty of noise. According to an anonymous clerk, Judge Andrew had ordered an internal memo to be drafted, accusing Zohran of contempt, intimidation, and political interference with judicial integrity. It wasn't legal language. It was personal, emotional, and leaked within hours. The memo hit the press that evening. Headlines exploded. Mamdani disrespects judiciary. Judge threatened in court by lawmaker. Queen's Assemblyman breaks decorum in housing case. The machine had started. Cable news took their cue. A familiar lineup of pundits painted Zohran as an activist gone rogue. His motives were questioned. His tone was dissected. His presence in a courtroom? Called a spectacle. No one discussed the tenants. No one showed the evictions. But then, someone leaked the security footage. Grainy, black and white, dated 2 months prior. It showed a line of police officers entering a tenement building at 2:17 a.m. A woman in a headscarf was dragged down the stairwell, a child crying behind her. No warrant, no announcement. That footage hit Twitter like a thunderclap. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether Zohran had overstepped. It was why no one else had stepped up. He wasn't a radical, he was a witness. And people were beginning to notice. The next morning, Zohran showed up to court again. No press, no speech, just folders, evidence, and exhaustion. Judge Andrew H. refused to meet him. The courtroom doors stayed locked. The docket read administrative recess. But in the hallway, a different kind of trial was beginning. A young intern approached Zohran, early 20s, nervous, and slipped him a flash drive. She whispered one sentence. This wasn't supposed to happen. That drive contained internal court communications, emails between Judge Andrew H. and an attorney from the property group, laughing at the delays, discussing how to bleed out the momentum of the hearings. One line in particular stood out. He'll burn out eventually. They all do. Public outrage doesn't survive a slow docket. Zohran didn't go to the press. He went to the people. That night, at a modest community hall in Jackson Heights, he held an open forum. Tenants, neighbors, students, elders, anyone who wanted to hear or speak. He read the emails out loud. He played the footage. He showed them what had been hidden, pixel by pixel, line by line. No theatrics, just truth. And truth, when told without filters, has a way of setting fires in places that thought themselves fireproof. By morning, there were protests. Peaceful, focused. Hundreds gathered outside the courthouse steps, holding photos of evicted families, holding signs with one word, why? And still, Judge Andrew H. said nothing. But silence now wasn't power. It was guilt. Do you think the legal system protects the people or protects itself? When the courts fail, who holds them accountable? If you believe people deserve more than silence, drop a comment. We want to hear what justice means to you. 3 days passed. The protests didn't shrink. They grew. What started as a few hundred voices outside the Manhattan Supreme Court had become a movement, not just in Queens, not just in New York, but on screens across the country. TikToks, news clips, editorials, all asking the same question. How did a sitting judge become the enforcer of corporate evictions? Judge Andrew H. was silent. No interviews, no clarifications. But inside the courthouse, he was preparing for something else. Retaliation. Zohran received a formal notice. A misconduct hearing. Accused of disrupting judicial proceedings, attempting to weaponize public opinion, and breaching courtroom ethics. A date was set. No jury. No public audience, just a sealed chamber and a closed-door process. The hearing would be held in the same building where the evictions had been buried. That morning, Zohran arrived early. No legal team, just his aide, a folder under his arm, and the quiet conviction of someone who knew the cost of telling the truth. He was ushered down a narrow hallway, away from the main courtroom, into a small hearing room with dark blinds and colder faces. At the head of the table, Judge Andrew H., presiding over the very case involving his own conduct. Conflict of interest? Obviously. But in systems designed to protect themselves, absurdity isn't a flaw. It's a shield. Mr. Mamdani, the judge began, this isn't a criminal trial. It's a professional review of your behavior. Zohran raised his hand. May I ask a question? No. You may respond when prompted. The hearing moved like a trap. Every response Zohran gave was twisted into accusation. His tone, disrespectful. His community forum, unauthorized political demonstration. The leaked footage? Irrelevant to courtroom behavior. But then, something unexpected. Halfway through the session, one of the judicial panel members interrupted. A woman in her late 50s. Stern face, razor-sharp eyes. Judge H., if this is a review of Mr. Mamdani's conduct, she asked slowly, why does every document in this file refer to his political affiliation? The room froze. Andrew H. stiffened. That's not relevant. It's in your own memo, she replied. You called him a leftist agitator interfering in court procedure. Those are your words. No response. Zohran remained silent. For once, silence was power. The woman leaned forward. Do we have any evidence that this hearing is about misconduct, or is this about embarrassment, about being challenged in public? No one answered. And in that pause, the truth finally broke the surface. It was never about court decorum. It was never about rules. It was about power and how it reacts when questioned. The hearing ended abruptly. No ruling, no decision, just the same cold silence Judge Andrew H. had used for weeks. But the damage was already done. That afternoon, one of the panel members resigned. A letter was leaked again, this time by a whistleblower. It described a deeply compromised process, inappropriate coordination, and intentional misuse of judicial discretion to target a sitting assembly member. And then, another blow. The chief judge of the state announced an emergency review of Andrew H.'s entire docket over the past year. Do you think power fears truth or exposure? Have you ever seen someone try to break the system, only to be broken by it? If this story speaks to you, tap the like button. Your voice matters more than you think. The court tried to move on, but the city didn't. Overnight, the judicial system in Manhattan became the story. Editorials no longer questioned Zohran's behavior. They questioned the bench. Tenants who had once been too afraid to speak now gave interviews. Videos surfaced. One by one, the narratives that had been buried under legal jargon came to light. And Judge Andrew H.? Still no statement. Still no apology. Until the State Commission summoned him. It was quiet. At first. A formal inquiry. Internal. Meant to die behind closed doors like so many others. But it didn't. Because one of the commissioners, the same woman who had questioned the judge's memo, decided to leak the findings. And in those pages, line by line, was the story of a man who had blurred justice with ego. Dozens of decisions reversed. Patterns of bias confirmed. Even private emails mocking immigrant names, exposed. For the first time, Judge Andrew H. had to face a courtroom not as its master, but as its subject. And in that same building where he once slammed the gavel at Zohran Mamdani, he now sat with a lawyer beside him. The room was packed. Press, families, lawyers, activists. Even some of the evicted tenants sitting in the very seats they were once denied access to. And then, he entered. Zohran. He didn't come to gloat. He came to testify. With calm, with precision, and with the full weight of someone who had never stopped believing that the courtroom belonged to the people, not to the powerful. When he took the stand, the silence was different now. It wasn't fear, it was respect. He told the commission everything, not just about Andrew H., but about the system that had allowed him to operate unchecked for years. He talked about the people who never got hearings, the families who never got notices, the loopholes, the delays, the silence. And when he finished, he didn't ask for a conviction. He asked for reform. Because Zohran wasn't fighting one man, he was fighting the idea that no one could fight back. The verdict came a week later. Judge Andrew H. was removed from the bench. His decisions from the past year were placed under review, and the court system, once silent, once shielded, was ordered to open a new public oversight committee, with Zohran among its founding members. That same night, he walked out of the courthouse not as a politician, not as a plaintiff, but as something much rarer, a public servant who had faced the system and refused to look away. Reporters surrounded him, asking how it felt to win. He paused, then said, "It's not a win. It's a beginning." Because the people he fought for weren't headlines. They were neighbors. And the justice they needed wasn't symbolic. It was overdue. Now, New York was listening. Do you believe one voice can change a system? Can courage survive in places built to erase it? If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if no one else would speak?